President Biden addressed world leaders once again today during the second and final day of the White House's virtual climate summit. He is joined by billionaires, CEOs, and union executives as he makes the economic case for taking steps to address the global crisis. Earlier, President Biden highlighted the opportunities of climate action in an attempt to sell his goal of cutting America's greenhouse gas emissions by half of what they were in 2005. Let's listen.
As we transition to a clean energy future, we must ensure that workers who have thrived in yesterday's and today's industries have as bright a tomorrow in the new industries, as well as in the places where they live, in the communities they have built. When we invest in climate resilience and infrastructure, we create opportunities for everyone. That's the heart of my jobs plan that I proposed here in the United States. It's how our nation intends to build an economy that gives everybody a fair shot.
President Biden is reportedly preparing to make another proposal to overhaul the country's economy. His upcoming $1.5 trillion plan is intended to help American families and could come at a cost for the country's wealthiest. Let's bring in Ed O'Keefe. He is at the White House. Ed, good to see you. So let us start with the president's family care plan and tax proposal. What does it entail, and how's it being received by Congress?
Well, the big asterisk on this guys is that it's still being put together. And if anything, these aides here at the White House who work with the president know that it isn't over until they are able to officially declare it, and that's not expected until next week. So what we know in general is that it's going to include proposals to help pay for and expand access to child care, pre-kindergarten classes, paid family leave, free community college for all or most Americans. I believe it's going to be most ultimately, although that hasn't been settled. Tax credits to fight poverty. These are things he and Democrats have campaigned on for years. The argument they're trying to make here is that in order to boost the nation's physical infrastructure, you've also got to be boosting its sort of societal or human infrastructure, because if you don't have workers who can, balance their work and life and do the jobs they need to do, it's going to be hard to sort of run this kind of future economy. All of this would be paid for with, among other things, taxing people, their capital gains tax. Millionaires, they're about 39.6 and change is the proposed increase. That, again, is also up for discussion, and it will immediately hit a roadblock among moderate Democrats and Republicans in the House and the Senate. Remember, things are divided 50-50 in the Senate right now. You only got about a 3 or 4 vote majority for Democrats in the House. So we'll see where this goes. All of it expected to be laid out next week by the president, either at or before his first address to a joint session of Congress next Wednesday night.
Republican senators unveiled their counteroffer to President Biden's infrastructure proposal. That plan includes a more than $500 billion framework. How different, besides that number, is the GOP's proposal from the president? And does the White House seem ready to give up any of its provisions to reach a compromise?
Yeah, it is much smaller. What is it, $900 billion versus nearly $2 trillion overall from the White House. The other big thing that's not in the Republican proposal that is in the White House proposal is are the plans regarding home care or sort of health care related costs to boost elderly care and to pay people who provide that care more. Republicans arguing that's not traditional infrastructure, shouldn't be part of this plan. Democrats arguing otherwise. So, $300 billion for roads and bridges, $61 billion for public transit, $20 billion for railroads. Their argument is this is a more traditional physical infrastructure style proposal. Democrats turn around and say, no, time to go big, time to be a little more expensive about it. And since Republicans didn't have an issue with how things should be paid for during the Trump years, why should we be so concerned this time? Although we've already heard from Democrats who lead the committees that would put this all together that they agree there's got to be at least some of this paid for in the next few years. White House generally says, good to see a proposal on the table. Doesn't mean we're going to take any of it at face value, but the conversations are set to continue. Remember, we have said this over and over again. The lack of urgency in this round of proposals means the talks on this are expected to continue up until Memorial Day, when the House will probably start passing something, and then well into the summer as we get closer to a final agreement.
So Congress has, in fact, been working on a series of bipartisan legislative efforts, including infrastructure, immigration, police reform. Just yesterday, the Senate voted to approve the anti-Asian hate crime bill. Everyone voted in favor, except for one person. President Biden campaigned on bridging the partisan divide. Are we finally seeing those hopes come to fruition, at least a little bit? And how much credit is the administration taking here?
Are we there yet? Well, look, they're talking. They're getting things passed. That's encouraging, certainly. The lone holdout there in the Senate was Josh Hawley of Missouri, saying that he thought the definition of what was being laid out is a little too broad. But, you know, getting one no vote and most Republican votes is a good signal. It'll go to the House and get passed in about 2 weeks when they get back from their spring recess. Talks on that, pretty much done. That one's sailing towards final passage. You're seeing also substantive conversations on immigration, police reform, how to counter the rise of China, and then, of course, these infrastructure talks. As long as the sides keep talking, working towards some kind of an agreement, you know, the White House is encouraged by it, and they're going to promote it and be part of it to whatever extent they need to be. But, you know, the real test will be, do bills get put together? Do votes get held? Do they draw support from both parties? And can they get through both chambers? If they can, it's because of a lot of reasons, mostly because members of Congress will tell you, some publicly, most privately, that after 4 years of Donald Trump, they are eager to actually be seen as doing things, cooperating with the other side, trying to work on some issues of substance, and we'll see if that happens. I'd argue, guys, the most encouraging development, and the one that I think will be a real test case in all of this, because immigration, climate change, this infrastructure stuff, that's sort of long-standing issues that have been held up for a long time. But the talks on police reform going on between Democrats Karen Bass of California and Cory Booker of New Jersey and Republican Tim Scott are perhaps the most interesting. This week, they all admitting those talks continue. They're looking especially at the issue of qualified immunity, whether someone could sue a police officer or the police agency involved in the shooting or the other incident that merits some kind of legal action. If they can get somewhere in the next few weeks and hand it over to leadership and say, you put the finishing touches on this, that's a sign that, you know, an issue is breaking through and there's agreement on all sides that something has to happen. Yes, it's being helped along by the verdict this week in Minnesota, but also just a general understanding that it's one of those issues that deserves to get some attention and get completed. And the group of people negotiating on it, the Republican Tim Scott, the only black Republican in the Senate, Cory Booker, one of his black colleagues in the Senate, Karen Bass, who's emerged as a key broker in the House. That's a good combination there, both sides believe, in possibly getting something done.
And Ed, before we let you go, yesterday the House voted once again to approve a bill that would admit Washington, D.C. as the country's 51st state. Let's talk about Democrats and their push for D.C. statehood and why there's some Republican opposition to it. I noted on CBS this morning that you can go back as far as the founding of this republic when the 13 original colonies were debating the criteria for allowing other states. Some of the language that you heard then, some of the language that you heard during the debates around Hawaii and Alaska are very similar to what we're hearing now.
Yeah, you know, the Republican opposition in essence is, look, if you look at the Constitution, we were supposed to have some kind of non-state entity serve as the nation's capital. Why would we reverse that? Of course, proponents say, look, there's more people living here than there are in Vermont or Wyoming. You know, we have a mix of issues going on in this city. They deserve statehood. The other concern Republicans have, of course, is it would add 2 probably reliably Democratic votes in the Senate, 1 more vote in the House. Years ago, there was a compromise, Vlad, I remember, to give the district 1 House seat and give Utah another House seat, which probably would have been Republican because they were the next state eligible to pick up a House seat. And so the thought was you're adding 1 Republican vote and 1 Democratic vote to the House. That idea got rejected. This one's moving forward. What folks should go look for, and maybe we have it, is how they would redraw the map of the District of Columbia. This is very interesting. Everything except essentially the National Mall, the White House, the monuments would be carved out to become what they call the Douglas Commonwealth. So you'd maintain the D.C., Douglas for Frederick Douglass. And then everything sort of along the mall would remain a federal territory that would be overseen by Congress, the executive branch, the Park Service, police, Secret Service essentially would be responsible for it. But that's essentially where nobody lives in town. It's just office buildings, museums, and monuments. That's the compromise they're working on right now. Problem is there isn't enough support even among Democrats yet in the Senate because, you know, these are the kinds of things that senators kind of throw up their hands and go, we have to think about this a little more. But it doesn't necessarily mean that we're at a point entirely where it'll get rejected. You know, interesting, though, that it got a vote.
That's the most optimistic I've heard anyone talk about that, to tell you the truth. You mentioned Tim Scott. Tim Scott getting a lot of GOP love because he's going to be delivering the official response to President Biden's remarks when he speaks in front of Congress next week, and it probably has a lot to do with the work that he has been doing on police reform. It's very timely right now for him. And I don't know, do you want to speak to that, or you're the White House kind of guy, so you might not want to speak to that.
No. But having spent some time at the other end of the street, I can say part of the challenge here was how do you find a Republican right now who sort of hugs the warring factions of the Republican Party, the pro-Trump wing, those that think he can't go that far anymore, those kind of in the middle who just are serving as the opposition to this White House. Tim Scott's really one of the few people that I think all sides can point to and say, yeah, good choice. Because he's someone, given his own background and experience, who, with authority and credibility, spoke out frequently against some of the things former President Trump did and said, but was able to maintain a substantive relationship with the Trump White House such that the former president's already endorsed his 2022 re-election campaign. So when Mitch McConnell and Kevin McCarthy, the Senate and House minority leaders, have to come together and figure out who is somebody that won't get a mean tweet or mean statement from the former president and who generally pleases every other Republican, Tim Scott's one of the few options they had, and so they went with him.
I don't know if the president's still tweeting, the former president, but yes.
No, he's issuing statements. We get plenty of them right here in our inbox every day.
I bet. Ed, thank you so much.
Have a good weekend.